12 days. That's how long Linda was gone. 12 days in Cabo San Lucas with 4 women who collectively spent more on sunscreen than most people spend on rent. And she came back with a tan, a tote bag full of overpriced hot sauce she'd never use, and something else she hadn't declared at customs. I didn't know what that something else was yet. I was just glad she was home. That's the part that still gets me. If I'm honest, I was glad. I'd picked her up from Salt Lake City International on a Friday evening, stood at arrivals with my hands in my jacket pockets like a husband in a movie, and when she came through those doors, sunburned, laughing at something on her phone, dragging a carry-on with a broken wheel she definitely broke and definitely wouldn't mention, I felt the particular warmth of a man who has spent 12 days eating cereal for dinner and is genuinely happy to see his wife. "You look good," I said. "I feel amazing." She kissed me quick, the way you kiss someone you're comfortable with rather than someone you've missed. I filed that away without meaning to. Architects notice things. It's occupational. The drive back to Emigration Canyon was fine, normal. She talked about Priya's sunburn, about the resort's infinity pool, about a boat trip on day 4 where someone, she didn't say who, had too much to drink and fell off the back. She laughed. I laughed. The canyon road curved up toward home in the last of the October light, and everything looked exactly like a life that was working. I didn't know it yet, but I was driving through the last normal evening I'd have for a very long time. The house in Emigration Canyon was my design. Not a boast, just a fact. 1,200 square feet of deliberate simplicity tucked into the hillside like it had always been there. Glass and reclaimed wood and sightlines that made the Wasatch Mountains part of every room. I'd built it the way I built everything, carefully, from the foundation up, with the intention that it would outlast me. Linda had wanted something bigger, something in Federal Heights maybe, or up on the East Bench where Priya and Derek had their place. 6 bedrooms, a wine cellar, the kind of house that announces itself before you've even parked. I'd said no, gently, repeatedly, eventually, firmly. She'd accepted it the way Linda accepted most things she disagreed with, visibly, vocally, and then quietly, because she understood that certain arguments with me had only one ending. She was socially ambitious in the way that people are when they've worked genuinely hard to get somewhere and want the world to acknowledge the distance traveled. I didn't resent it. I understood it. I just didn't share it, which is not the same thing as not loving her for it. 10 years of marriage. That's what I was working with. 10 years of her laugh and her terrible taste in television, and the way she reorganized the kitchen every few months as though the mugs had offended her. 10 years of a person. You don't throw that away because the math gets uncomfortable. But you do pay attention to the math. Sunday was when I found it. Day 3 of Linda being home. She was out brunch with Priya at some place in Sugar House. The kind of Sunday ritual that had survived every season of their friendship like a cockroach in nice shoes. I was doing laundry. The deeply unglamorous architecture of a marriage. Someone has to do the laundry. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that. I was emptying the bathroom trash, the small one under the sink, the one Linda handles about as often as she handles the sprinkler timer, which is to say never. And there it was. Wrapped in tissue, careful, deliberate. The wrapping of someone who understood that things buried are not the same as things gone. I unwrapped it the way I'd open a load-bearing wall, slowly, with full awareness that what I found might change the structure of everything. 2 lines. I stood in my bathroom in Emigration Canyon on a Sunday morning in October, and I looked at a pregnancy test that belonged to my wife. And I did the math. The math was not kind. Linda and I hadn't been together in the 3 weeks before she left for Cabo. Not for any dramatic reason, just the quiet drift that happens sometimes. Work and tiredness. And the particular distance that accumulates when 2 people are living parallel lives in the same house. 3 weeks before the trip. 12 days in Cabo. She'd been home 3 days. I was an architect. I worked in exact measurements. There was no version of this math that worked in my favor. I didn't throw anything. Didn't sit on the floor, didn't do any of the things you see in movies. I took out my phone. Photographed the test from 3 angles. The result window, the brand, the date printed on the packaging that Linda hadn't thought to remove. Then I wrapped it back in its tissue, placed it exactly as I'd found it, and closed the cabinet. Then I went and finished the laundry. I called Troy that afternoon from the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, 2 miles up, where the city drops away below you and the Great Salt Lake sits flat and silver in the distance, and everything looks very small and very manageable from a sufficient height. He picked up on the second ring. "You hiking?" he said. "On a Sunday? You never hike on Sundays." "I hike sometimes." "Matt, you hiked once in 2019, and you complained about your knees for a week." "Troy." Something in my voice. He heard it immediately. That's the thing about brothers who know you. They hear the thing underneath the thing. "What happened?" he said. Not a question. I told him. All of it. The trip, the return, the test in the bathroom trash, the math. I told it the way I tell a client about a structural problem. Clearly, sequentially, without catastrophizing, because catastrophizing helps no one and fixes nothing. When I finished, Troy was quiet for a moment. "You're sure?" he said. "I'm an architect, Troy. I measure things for a living." "Okay." A breath. "Okay. Do you know who?" "I have a suspicion," I said. "I'm not ready to say it out loud yet." "Why not?" "And once it becomes a thing I know, I have to decide what to do about it. And I'm not ready to decide what to do about it until I know everything." A long pause from Sugar House. "You're the only person I know," Troy said slowly, "who approaches a marriage crisis like a building permit." "Building permits," I said, "keep structures from collapsing on people." He didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I, really. But it sounded right. And sometimes sounding right is the only scaffolding you've got. The suspicion had a name. Derek Hollis. I'd met Derek Hollis at a dinner party in Federal Heights 3 years ago. He was the kind of man who filled a room by volume. Loud laugh, louder opinions, the specific energy of someone who had made money fast and wanted everyone to feel the heat of it. He ran Hollis Hospitality Group with a partner who did most of the actual work, and he had the handshake of a man who had taken a course on handshakes. His wife Priya was sharp and funny, and entirely too good for him, which I thought privately and never said out loud, because that is not a thing you say out loud at dinner parties. He and Linda had always been friendly. The easy friendliness of people in the same social orbit who run into each other at the same restaurants, and the same rooftop events, and the same Priya-organized occasions. I had not thought anything of it. I was an idiot. No, that's not fair to me. I was trusting. There's a difference. Idiots don't notice things. I noticed plenty. I just chose to interpret them generously the way you do when you love someone, and the alternative interpretation is a load-bearing wall you're not ready to knock down. The wall was coming down regardless. I just hadn't swung the hammer yet. I called Dr. Nora Corbin on Monday morning from my office at Camper & Briggs on 200 South. She was an OB colleague of a friend, recommended by a physician I'd designed a clinic for in Sugar House 2 years back. I explained the situation with the clinical detachment of a man who had decided that feelings were a second draft problem. "I need to understand the confirmation timeline," I said, without involving my wife directly. She was quiet for a moment. Professional. Thoughtful. "What I can tell you," she said carefully, "is that a standard test reads accurate from about 10 to 14 days post-conception. If the test was taken within the first few days of return from a 12-day trip, the conception window would be during the trip," I said. "Almost certainly," she said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Camper." "Don't be," I said. "I'm still in the information-gathering phase." Another pause. "That's a very architectural way to handle this," she said. "So I've been told." Hung up. Sat in my office for exactly 4 minutes looking at the Wasatch Range through my window. Then I called Martha Reeves. "Welcome back to Dad's Sweet Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here." Martha Reeves had been practicing family law in Salt Lake City for 31 years. She was 62, iron-haired, and had the energy of a woman who had seen every variety of human catastrophe and found most of them vaguely predictable. Her office on West Temple had exactly 0 inspirational quotes on the walls, which was the first thing I'd noticed when I'd referred a friend to her years ago, and the reason I'd trusted her ever since. "Matthew Camper," she said when she picked up. "Please tell me this is a referral and not a personal matter." "Martha," I said, "I need to talk." A pause. "How bad?" "Possibly architectural." "I'm going to need you to explain what that means." "It means I haven't decided what to demolish yet, but I'm drawing up the plans." She sighed, not impatiently, But the way experienced people sigh when they recognize that a client is going to require their full attention and probably several billable hours. "Come in Thursday," she said. 8 a.m. Bring everything you have. I'll bring coffee too. Matthew. Her voice softened exactly 1 degree, which, for Martha Reeves, was essentially a hug. "I'm sorry." "Thursday," I said. 8 a.m. I didn't know it yet, but Thursday's meeting with Martha was going to change the shape of everything that came after. Not because of what she told me, because of what she asked. I put down the phone, opened my project files, and went back to work. Because someone has to design the buildings, and because some foundations, once you've seen the crack, you cannot unsee. There is a specific kind of person who can walk through a house that's about to be demolished and still see what it was supposed to be. Most people just see the damage, the cracks, the water stains, the places where the structure gave way. Architects see the original intention underneath all of it, the thing the builder meant before weather and time and bad decisions got involved. I spent 13 days being that kind of person about my own marriage. It was exhausting. I don't recommend it. Day 4, Monday. Linda made breakfast and talked about Priya's plan to redo their kitchen in Federal Heights, quartz countertops, an island, the whole production. She talked about it the way she talked about most things in those days, slightly too cheerfully, with the specific brightness of someone lighting a room to cover a smell. "Priya's so excited," she said, sliding eggs onto my plate. "Derek found some contractor who's supposed to be amazing." "Good for Derek," I said. She looked at me for half a second. Then she looked back at the pan. She knew I didn't like Derek. I'd never said it directly. But Linda had always been perceptive about the things I didn't say, which made what she'd done in Cabo either more complicated or less. I hadn't decided which yet. "You should eat those before they get cold," she said. "I should," I agreed. I ate my eggs. She poured my coffee. We were 2 people performing a marriage for an audience of 0, and we were both very good at it. The things I didn't say at that table would have filled a building. Calvin Briggs had been my business partner for 8 years, and my friend for 12. He was the opposite of me in most visible ways. Loud where I was quiet, instinctive where I was methodical. The kind of man who closed deals over bourbon and charm, while I closed them over drawings and documentation. We worked because of the contrast. Good architecture usually does. I told him on day 5. Tuesday, in our office after Janet, our receptionist, had gone home and the building on 200 South had gone quiet the way downtown buildings do after 6 p.m., all echoes and parking garage hum. I laid it out, the test, the math, the trip, Derek Hollis. Calvin sat across from me and did not say a single word for approximately 90 seconds, which was the longest I had ever seen Calvin Briggs stay silent about anything. "Derek Hollis," he finally said. "That's my read. Derek Hollis, who has been trying to get us to invest in his River District Hotel for what, 8 months? Calvin leaned back in his chair, a slow, careful lean, the body language of a man rearranging furniture in his head. "Matt," he said, "tell me you're thinking what I'm thinking." "I've been thinking it since Sunday," I said. The investment. Calvin turned his pen in his fingers, his thinking gesture, the one he'd had since graduate school. "We haven't signed anything. The term sheet is still on my desk." "I know. If we were to take our time with due diligence, thoroughness is a professional obligation," I said. "It would be irresponsible not to be thorough. How long do you need?" 13 days, I said. "I need 13 days. He nodded slowly. "Put down the pen. I'll be in a meeting. A very long meeting, indefinitely." I didn't know it yet, but those 13 days were going to be the most productive of my professional life. Not because of the work I did, because of the work I stopped. Martha Reeves on Thursday morning was exactly what I needed, which was someone who looked at the blueprint of my situation and told me where every wall was without flinching. "You have no proof of paternity yet," she said, reading glasses on, legal pad open. "The test proves pregnancy. The timeline supports your suspicion. That's circumstantial. I'm not going to court, Martha. I'm going to a conversation." She looked at me over her glasses. "Explain." So I did. I told her about Derek's hotel deal, about the investment group, about the term sheet sitting unsigned on Calvin's desk. I told her about the 7 months of pitch meetings and the follow-up emails, and Derek Hollis's very expensive campaign to get Camper and Briggs's capital into his River District project. Martha set down her pen. "So he spent 7 months courting your money," she said. "While apparently courting my wife," I said. "Man likes to multitask." She almost smiled. Martha Reeves almost smiling was the equivalent of a standing ovation from anyone else. "What do you want the outcome to look like, Matthew?" "I want it to look like what it is," I said. "A structure that was built on a bad foundation, coming down in a controlled demolition. No one buried in the rubble who doesn't deserve to be there. And I want Derek Hollis to understand, completely, specifically, and in terms he can't misread, exactly what room he was standing in when he made his decision." She studied me for a long moment. "And Linda?" I looked out her window at West Temple, a UTA bus moving through the intersection. "Regular Tuesday. Linda made a choice," I said quietly. "I'm going to make sure she can live with the consequences of it without being destroyed by them. She gets the house. She gets enough to be fine. But she doesn't get to pretend it didn't happen." Martha nodded slowly. Something moved in her expression that wasn't quite admiration and wasn't quite sadness. "I've been doing this for 31 years, she said. "I don't say this often." She picked up her pen. "You're handling this with more dignity than most people handle a parking dispute." "I'm an architect," I said. "I don't build things to fall apart." Day 9. Saturday, Linda was getting careless. Or maybe she was getting comfortable. Sometimes those look identical, until they don't. She'd started disappearing into the back porch to take phone calls. 10 minutes at a time, door closed, voice low. I didn't listen at the door. I didn't need to. The pattern was its own testimony. That evening at dinner she said, "Derek and Priya might be coming over next Saturday. Would that be okay?" I looked up from my plate. "Sure," I said. "That'd be great." She searched my face for something, didn't find it, because I wasn't leaving it there to be found. "You sure?" she said. "I know you and Derek aren't exactly—" "Linda." I smiled. Easy. Warm. The smile of a man with excellent plans. "It's fine. Invite them." I didn't know it yet. Actually, that's a lie. I absolutely knew. I just hadn't told her that I knew, which is a different thing entirely. She smiled back. Relieved. The smile of a woman who had mistaken my patience for obliviousness. The last and most expensive mistake of her marriage. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So, thank you for real. Day 12. Tuesday. I made the call that changed the architecture of everything. Not to Linda, not to Derek, not even to Martha. I called Priya Hollis. Before you judge that, understand this. Priya was innocent. In a story full of people making terrible choices, Priya Hollis had made none of them. She was funny and sharp, and had spent the last 12 days believing her husband was exactly where he said he was, doing exactly what he said he was doing. She deserved to know. Not from me, not directly, not yet. But she deserved the information when it was solid, so I made an arrangement. A careful one. The kind that required a forensic accountant named Ray Stubbs, who Calvin had used twice before, a manila folder, and a specific envelope addressed to Priya's sister in Draper, to be delivered on day 17, not a moment before. Some structures require precise timing. Day 13. Wednesday, I worked late at the office. Came home to find Linda asleep, her phone face down on the nightstand with the screen slightly too dark, the kind of darkness you set deliberately. I stood in the doorway of my bedroom, the bedroom of the house I'd designed, in the canyon I'd chosen, with the sight lines that made the mountains part of every room, and I looked at my wife sleeping and I felt, very clearly and very specifically, the grief of a man who has finished reading the plans and knows what has to come down. Not anger. Grief. There's a difference. Anger wants to break things. Grief wants to build something else in the wreckage. I went to the kitchen, made tea I didn't drink, sat at the table I'd built from a reclaimed oak beam from a farmhouse in Toole County, and I drew, not blueprints, just lines. The way I did when I was 23 and couldn't sleep, and the only thing that helped was making shapes on paper until the world organized itself. By 2 a.m., I had something that wasn't quite a plan and wasn't quite a feeling. It was a decision. Day 17 was 4 days away. You can tell a lot about a person by how they enter a room they think is safe. Linda came through the front door of our house in Emigration Canyon on day 17. A Sunday warm for October, the Wasatch gold and amber above the canyon like the mountains had dressed for the occasion, and she was laughing. Still laughing at something Priya had said in the car, the tail end of a joke I wasn't part of and didn't need to be, carrying a bottle of wine she'd picked up for dinner, and a lightness that belonged to a woman who believed she was walking into an ordinary evening. She got 3 steps inside before she stopped. The house was packed. Not destroyed, not ransacked. Packed. Every item that was hers. Clothes, books, the record collection she'd curated for 9 years, the photographs she'd chosen, the throw pillows she'd bought and I'd tolerated, the Cabo hot sauce that had never been opened, boxed, labeled, stacked with the geometric precision of a man who did this for a living. 16 boxes. I had counted. Each one labeled in clear block letters, organized by room of origin. A filing system for a life being returned. The wine bottle slipped in her hand. She caught it. Matt. Her voice was very small. Hey, Linda. I was sitting at the kitchen table, jacket on, hands flat on the table. The table I'd built from Thule oak. The table we'd eaten 10 years of dinners at. Close the door. It's cold. She closed it. Slowly. Like she was buying time. She looked at the boxes. At me. At the boxes again. What? She stopped. What is this? Moving assistance, I said. I labeled everything clearly. Kitchen. Bedroom. Study. The boxes in the hallway are miscellaneous. I wasn't always sure what was yours and what was ours, so I defaulted to yours. You can sort it at your leisure. Matthew. Her voice cracked on the second syllable. What are you doing? I'm being organized, I said. You always said I was too organized. Turns out it's useful. She crossed the room in 5 steps and put the wine on the counter and stood in front of me, and I could see it then. Not guilt. Not yet. Not quite. Something more complicated. The face of a woman trying to read a situation she'd wildly miscalculated. Can you please just talk to me? She said. Please. Whatever you think. Linda. I said it gently. Sit down. She sat, across from me, hands in her lap. I reached into the folder beside me and placed 3 things on the table between us. First, the photograph of the pregnancy test, printed on plain paper. Clinical. Exact. She looked at it. Her face did something I won't describe in detail because some things are private even in the wreckage of a marriage. Second, a document from Martha Reeves' office. Divorce petition. Already filed. 2 days ago. Friday morning, 8 a.m. Her eyes moved to it, then back to me. Third, a printed email. 3 paragraphs. Sent from a resort Wi-Fi network in Cabo San Lucas on day 6 of the girls' trip. From Linda's personal account to a private Gmail address that a digital forensics contact of Calvin's had traced back, patiently and thoroughly, to Derek Hollis. I'd read it twice. I didn't need to read it again. Some measurements you only need to take once. The silence in my kitchen was total. Outside, a canyon wind moved through the oak trees. A sound like breathing. How long? She whispered. Sunday the 8th, I said. Bathroom trash. I found it when I was doing the laundry. I paused. I've always done the laundry, Linda. She closed her eyes. Matt, that's not the issue. I straightened the papers on the table. A habit, a reflex, the gesture of a man who keeps things ordered even when they're falling. The issue is that sorry and consequences aren't the same thing. You know that. You've always known that about me. Where am I supposed to go? She said. It wasn't defiant. It was just the question of someone standing in a demolished building trying to locate the exit. Priya's, I said, and watched her face. It happened slowly. The color shifting. The understanding arriving in stages. First confusion, then something sharper, then the full terrible weight of what I just said. What did you do? She breathed. I didn't do anything, I said. I'm an architect, Linda. I don't do things prematurely. I wait until all the load-bearing elements are identified. Matthew. My phone buzzed on the table. I turned it face up so she could see the screen. A text from Troy. She knows. Priya just called me. Matt, she knows everything. Linda looked at the text, then at me. Her voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. How? A mutual contact, I said. Someone who thought Priya deserved to make her own informed decision, independently of mine. I stood, smoothed my jacket, the way adults are supposed to. Derek is going to. She stopped herself. Derek, I said pleasantly, is having a very specific Sunday. I picked up my keys from the counter. You see, the investment group that Calvin and I run, the one that Derek has been aggressively courting for the past 7 months, with the pitch decks and the site visits and the very nice dinners he expensed, sent a letter Friday afternoon. Formal withdrawal from all preliminary discussions, citing an undisclosed conflict of personal interest. I paused at the kitchen doorway. The letter went to his co-investors as a courtesy copy, as is standard practice. The silence stretched. Standard practice, Linda repeated. Hollow. In venture circles, I said, when the lead money walks, the other money gets nervous. It's not personal. It's just physics. I looked at her for a long moment, my wife of 10 years standing in the kitchen of the house I built, surrounded by the boxed evidence of a life that was over. Derek's flagship hotel in the River District is going to need to find new backing. In this market, that's, I want to say 6 to 9 months of work, minimum, assuming the other conversations don't get complicated. She sat very still. I didn't do any of that to hurt you, I said, and I meant it. I did it because Derek Hollis spent 7 months sitting across conference room tables from me, trying to get my money while he was in Cabo with my wife. And I genuinely believe, that a man like that should understand, completely and specifically, what room he was standing in. I picked up my overnight bag from beside the door, packed 3 days ago. Troy's place in Sugar House was 20 minutes down the canyon. The house, I said. You can stay through the settlement. Martha will be in touch this week about terms. You'll be fine, Linda. I've made sure of that. I paused. The Thule oak table stays. I built that. Just the quiet, steady kind. Matt. My name in her mouth like something she was learning to say in a different context. I'm so sorry. I know. I said. And I did know. And it also didn't change a single measurement. I opened the front door. The canyon air came in. Cold, clean, the smell of October in elevation, and the specific clarity you get above the city when everything small falls away below you. Who designed a better life for you than I did? I said quietly. Not angry, not performing, just the plain truth of a man who had built something real and watched it get taken apart by someone who hadn't bothered to read the blueprints. I didn't wait for an answer. I walked to my truck, put it in reverse, and pulled out of the driveway of the house I'd built in the canyon I'd chosen. And I drove down through Emigration Canyon toward Sugar House, with the windows down and the Wasatch behind me going dark gold in the evening light. I didn't look back. I never look back at a completed project. 3 weeks later, Calvin told me Derek Hollis had called the office 4 times. He'd remained, professionally, in a meeting. 6 weeks later, Priya Hollis filed for divorce. Her attorney, by coincidence or providence, was Martha Reeves. 11 weeks later, Derek's River District hotel deal collapsed entirely when his remaining co-investor discovered, through their own due diligence, 3 financial irregularities that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with Derek being the kind of man who cut corners on documents the way he cut corners on marriage. I didn't make a single call about that. Some buildings fail on their own schedule. I designed a new house the following spring. Smaller than the one in the canyon, a lot in the Avenues neighborhood, east-facing, morning light through every window. I drew it the way I drew everything, from the foundation up, with the intention that it would outlast me. 1 bedroom, my desk by the east window. A kitchen with a table I hadn't built yet but could picture clearly, something solid, something that belonged entirely to me. I still have the dollar bill. Wrong story, wrong story. I still have the photograph I took on a Sunday morning in October, the one from the bathroom trash, folded once, tucked into the back of my project binder, behind the drawings for the Avenues house. Not as a wound, not as a trophy, just as a measurement. The exact point where I stopped building something that wasn't working and started drawing something that would. Every structure begins with knowing where the ground is. Now I knew. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you, genuinely.